Namaskar. Now we are going to study about the region in the context of globalization. Globalization is a generic term and a well-known concept in the world. It can be defined in a number of different ways depending on the context. The definition given by Knight and vid in 1997 for globalization is the flow of technology, economy, knowledge, people, values, ideas across the borders. Globalization affects every country in a different way due to a nation's individual history, traditions, culture and priorities. Globalization is a process that cuts across the boundaries of nations, cultures and societies. It is a large integration of the world. It facilitates interdependence towards a global culture. Globalization is expected to be a process through which an increasingly free flow of ideas, people, goods, services and capital would lead to the integration of economies and societies. It is characterized by an accelerated flow of trade, capital and information as well as mobility of individuals across geographical borders. Hence, in this episode, the following aspects are going to be seen: the migration of women in the context of globalization, challenges of globalization on Indian higher education, dairy marketing strategies in the context of globalization, productivity growth in Indian agriculture, globalization and Northeast India. The first aspect is the migration of women in the context of globalization. Globalization has become one of the most used terms of the 1990s. It signifies the transition towards a global community with common norms and an institutional framework that facilitates international cooperation. The economic implications of the concept revolve around the assumptions that there are forces operating at the global level that are behind the direct control of any particular country, but which increasingly tie states into borders groupings. The authority and integrity of the nation state are thus being eroded. Global communications are diffusing common values not only in terms of consumer pattern, but also in attitudes towards the number of children and ultimately towards family size, marriage and family formation. In this aspect, the subtopic is regional division. The regional divisions reflect changing intensity of involvement in the global system. The first region represents core areas as sources of investments for other parts of the Asian region. These are highly urbanized areas in which the status of women in terms of education and participation in the labor forces trends to be high. Although manufacturing remains important, throughout much of this region, it is the emergence of a treasury services economy that has been the principal recent structural change in the economies. The second region represents expansion of the core areas and encompasses those areas to which most of the foreign and domestic investments have been directed. Such investment has been extremely unevenly distributed across space and is concentrated in special economic zones, growth triangles or other centers of economic dynamisms. These are areas of intense immigration and rapid urban growth. The third region, the labor frontier, represents the sources for much of the migration to the centers of dynamisms where the impact on status is one of the out-migration rather than immigration. The fourth region, the resource niche, represents those areas that are as yet quite tenuously linked to the global system, where there is as yet relatively little out-migration or immigration. The final region represents those small islands economies that exhibit a great variety in their migration patterns and their degree of integration with the global community. General conclusions about the impact of globalization on female migration for a region as large as that covered by ESCAP would be largely meaningless. A policy recommendation is need to be geared to specific situations in specific contexts, which reinforce the advantages of a regional approach to the assessment of the impact of globalization on the migration of women. The impact of global forces on female migration will be examined for each region before an attempt is made at policy recommendations. The core economies are the most developed and most highly urbanized areas in India. Fertility has come down to low levels, and throughout this region immigration rather than emigration is the dominant trend. In all of these economies, the participation of women in education is high, and the incorporation of women into the labor force as recorded by official figures is also high. The shift towards a service economy as urban centers in these economies have emerged as regional global cities as favored the incorporation of women into the labor force at all skill levels. There are nevertheless significant differences in the patterns of female migration associated with the globalization in sub-regions.